of that era. That's a name that I associate with that era from all the books, all the clips, and that sort of thing. I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah, and certainly the esteem he's held in by sort of Australia. You can tell he just did, and his Origin performances as well. Obviously, he's captain New South Wales in 20 odd Origins, did very well there. And yeah, he's just someone everybody talks about as being that player that did take it on, and also the uncle of Mitch Moses.
Yes, yeah.
So gave
that kid something that he's going to struggle to ever live up to. Tim, do you want to take us through what Paul O'Brien got in touch to say?
Yeah, at POV the Vikings said Phil McKenzie, Phil Cantillon, Jimmy Lowes, Terry Newton, Kieran Cunningham, just some of the greats of the game. So who have we not talked about so far in that list?
Phil McKenzie is a name that I don't know anything about. I did Google search it yesterday, and obviously he played for Widnes. But I forgot what I read. So I'll just Google search him again. And see if the right one comes up. Australian hooker who played for Widnes during the Cup King years of '86 through to the early '90s. So there you go. Scotland international as well, I believe. I think it says here, or he had a Scottish grandfather anyway. So certainly was linked there. I don't know if he played for Scotland, but yeah. So you can tell why someone like Paul would pull out a player who was involved in their sort of great trophy years of the late '80s. So that's a fair shout. Phil Cantillon. Does anyone remember Phil Cantillon from sort of that Widnes team that came back into Super League back in the early noughts?
Yes, it's certainly a name I remember seeing, even if I couldn't necessarily tell you a lot about him.
So I think Neil McEwen replied to Paul, just sort of reinforcing the Phil Cantillon mention, but sort of saying no one's going to talk about him because he played for a small club. Well, I think Phil Cantillon's biggest issue is his main moments of greatness were at the Championship level. They were not at the Super League level, unfortunately for him. But what I do remember about him was he was an outstanding try scorer. I think he surpassed Ellery Hanley's records for tries in a season by a forward, but this was at the Championship, not at the top division. So again, it doesn't quite carry the same cachet. But I think he scored 40 odd tries in the season that they got promoted. Widnes did, and so I was dead excited to see him come into Super League and see if he could be a real running threat compared to like the other guys who I saw as more could run, but were more kind of clever players that set things up, and so he felt like he was different to Newton, to Cunningham, to Lowes, who were and Jackson, who were the big names at the time. So I thought, oh, this guy could be exciting, and he didn't quite crack it the same at Super League, unfortunately. I think he played. No,
he scored 48 tries in 2001.
Yeah, that's a fantastic record, even at the Championship level, isn't it?
And he's the only player to have scored 5 tries in a match more than once. He did it 3 times.
Wow. That can't be true.
And
not that he did it 3 times, but that is the only player to do it more than once. Sorry, Sarah, I missed that last one, sorry.
He also scored 7 tries in one match.
Which I guess is a record for a forward.
Yeah, it's the most tries in a match by a forward.
So, great Championship career and, decent career. Tim, he played for Wales, I believe, if I remember right. I'm pretty sure he was in that 2000 World Cup squad that got to the quarterfinals and impressed a lot of people on the way.
No, he's Irish.
Oh, then he was in the Irish side that got to the quarterfinals and was roundly beaten by England.
He captained Ireland.
There you go then. I remember him being in that World Cup. Obviously, I remember the colours wrong. Okay.
Both have a bit of green on them.
Final one is Mike Webster got in touch and said the only one best hooker for me, Kieran Cunningham. I remember him in a Challenge Cup semi-final at Central Park versus Salford in '97. He ambled the length of the pitch, seemingly pausing to knock over Salford players when necessary. He was also the one to sort out Terry Newton on the night of his assaults on Sean Long, etc. And finally, which is the thing that I left out when we talked about Kieran Cunningham before. Finally, scoring the last tries at Nosey Road will always be with those that were there. Yeah, there was something kind of written in it that it was Kieran Cunningham's last season, St Helens' last season at Nosey Road. It was always going to be that he was going to score the last try at Nosey Road, I feel. And then, of course, they won that game. They went to the grand final and lost to Wigan. So, yeah, thanks for that, Mike. Lots of shouts for Kieran Cunningham. I definitely think if we're sort of talking...
Do you know who Kieran Cunningham reminds me of in terms of cartoon characters?
Go on.
You know Bowser from Mario Kart? Yeah. He's got that sort of shell on his back, that permanently pained expression, and he's quite happy to just swap people out of the way. It's Kieran Cunningham.
I mean, that's fantastic. Yeah. Right. Let's move on to some of our own personal favourites, if there's any that we haven't covered. Sarah, there's one that I want to mention that obviously is before your time. I'm surprised your dad didn't bring him up, but maybe it's slightly before your dad's time as well. The first hooker to ever win the Lance Todd Trophy. He won it in a losing side, of course, because it was Hull FC at Wembley. But in 1960, Tommy Harris won the Man of Steel. He also was, I think, a goal kicker. I think he played lots. I think is the most capped starting hooker for Great Britain is Tommy Harris. So that's the name. I don't know if that's a name that still is talked about at Hull FC. I'm guessing he had a long Hull FC career and was quite...
Yeah, he is a name that is definitely still talked about around the club and stuff. But I think the problem is the number of people that would have seen him play is so few. I mean, it's before Dad started watching rugby.
Right, so we are going. Well, we're going back 60 years, aren't we, for sort of the peak of his career? So, obviously, though, a fantastic player in his day. So I thought he was worth a mention from the past, and of course, Mike Stevenson. He was a Harry Sunderland winner for Dewsbury when they shocked everyone in 1973 to win a trophy. He also scored important tries in England World Cup win that decade as well, the year before that, and obviously we all know was then the Sky commentator for 26 years or 36, whatever, a long time.
Forever.
So that's another one
felt
from
like
the
a long
past
time, yeah.
to go alongside some of the other ones we've spoken about. Tim,
I've got a couple. Yeah, a couple of my all Australians actually. Interestingly, first one would be Jeff Tuvey, the Angry Ant. So I remember, seeing some games of his playing for Manly and
coach.
Yes, and yes.
Sorry,
tourist
or something.
Tourist. Yeah, holiday. He was on a holiday. He had a long holiday.
Yeah.
But yeah. And yeah, it is hard to separate him out from his coaching career and demands for investigations. But yeah, just again, someone who's very physically robust, took a lot of knocks as someone who often got shot. Not the biggest, and he's known as the Angry Ant, and just that. There's pictures of him just absolutely seething, sizing up to people, looking like he's about to expire, but still doing some absolute wonder tries and what. Great work. And then
his
the modern era,
peak was the sort of second half of the 90s, wasn't it? Tuvi's playing time, was it?
Yeah.
So kind of he benefited a bit in a weird way from the period of time where Australia didn't quite, or the States didn't quite have those absolute, the time of people like Elias and Walters had passed, and the time of people like Smith and Buderus was yet to come, and so he was in that period where there wasn't as many, so he kind of did get to probably play more Origin games and stuff than he might have done in other eras.
Yeah, that's fair. And speaking of New South Wales hookers, there's two others that we need to talk about. One is Robbie Farah.
Yeah,
who
Lebanon
again,
captain.
Lebanon captain, provided again another kind of evolution of the role of hooker again to be that sort of third half kind of player, similar to we talking about with the fullbacks.
Hold on, no. First half, main half, dominant half, only player allowed to tell people what to do. But then take no
providing
responsibility when it goes wrong.
Yeah, but providing that extra link up in attack in particular, and taking that responsibility. And then the other one that was certainly just a favourite of enjoying watching was Danny Buderus.
Yeah, well, Danny Buderus was a Dally M winner in 2004, and of course he was a Super League winner as well, wasn't he, with the Leeds Rhinos towards the end of his career. So he had a very good career on both sides of the world.
Yeah, and speaking of players who played on both sides of the world, personal favourite would be Matt Parcell, having obviously played KR now, but also having played down at Manly. Just that, just quite someone who comes on and is able to produce something where there's not necessarily anything on. And that's the sort of hooker I like. Someone who can come and inject something in when you need it.
Yeah, that first year of his at Leeds in 2017, he was fantastic, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Sarah.
And then one final one on my list is an international, someone who has played hooker at international level, and had an interesting career, but Brett Ferris.
Sarah.
England, former England hooker Brett Ferris.
Brett Ferris does not belong in this conversation.
Well, blame Steve McNamara then.
So,
still bitter.
Man of Steel, there's been 5 Man of Steel winners since 1977 when it started that have been hookers. David Ward, we talked about. James Lowe's won it in 97 for Bradford. James Roby in 2007 we talked about, and Darryl Clark in 2014. The final one on the list is certainly someone I'm guessing you need to talk to us about a little bit more, and that is, mate, 2016 Man of Steel winner, Danny Houghton of Hull FC.
Yeah, he wasn't actually. So my story is my first ever favourite player was a hooker, and I guess in the sense like Tom, he's probably not the best player out there. I think he was my favourite player because he was actually the smallest player on the pitch, but he went by the name of Mike Dixon, and he probably played for us probably mid-90s, early 90s maybe. He was still around when we won promotion in 97, but that was pretty much the end, I think. So yeah, he was my favourite player. And then I was just thinking
kind of like the Jez Litton who was allowed to play.
Yeah, but I don't think he was particularly young. He was just small. He was just short. But yeah, he was my favourite player, and I think it purely came down to that fact.
Yeah.
When you're young, these are the things that bother you, aren't they?
Yeah, you can get fascinations, can't you, when you...
Yeah. And then the other hooker, before I go on to talk about Danny Houghton, that I wanted to mention was Andrew Purcell. He played for us, I think, in 1999 or 98. I'm not sure which, but it was one of those bleak years. Mm-hmm. I really felt for him because he was a player that clearly had so much talent, but was just surrounded by so much rubbish that he couldn't do a lot. But there were just odd times. You just got this flash of what he could do. But I think my one overwhelming memory was it must have been 1998, because it was the night that Horn, Cook and King made their debuts away at Leeds. And there was those 3 who were obviously very, very young, 16, 17 and 18. There was Richard Fletcher, who was 19, and a few other youngish local lads. And Purcell was playing as well. And we sort of travelled to Leeds expecting the worst. We had this 16-year-old fullback making his debut, and we were all a little bit worried about the Leeds forwards charging at him. But come the end of the match, these lads had given such a good performance, and I can't remember the score, but it wasn't a thrashing by any stretch of the imagination. And it was in the old days at Headingley where you'd change ends at half time. So we had gone round to the other side, and